Here's what we've got. We're pulling from 4chan tonight. Threads that are twisted and genuinely horrifying. These stories are unfiltered and real. Like the video, subscribe, volume up, and let's go. The alert came up at 3:47 on a Tuesday morning, and for the first 2 seconds I honestly thought someone was running a drill on me. I'd been working the overnight desk out of the CTC office off Kinsey for about 4 years. February 2022, cold outside, and the windows on the north wall had that thin white fuzz in the corners. The room was me, Charlie, and Renee. Charlie was on his second thermos. Renee had her earbuds in, watching something on her phone during the dead stretch between the last freight and the early Metra. The board is basically a map of every active line we cover. Trains show up as tagged icons that crawl along the lines close to real time. Every icon has an ID from the transponder on the lead unit, plus speed and whatever the crew has logged. You look at it long enough, it becomes wallpaper. When something is off, your eye catches before your brain does. At 3:47, my eye caught something on the west section of the board, and my brain didn't catch up for a good beat and a half. There was a train. Tagged and moving, clean signal, eastbound at 22 miles an hour on a segment I knew was clear. The problem was where it had come from. I zoomed in. The tag showed it coming from a spur off the old B line, north of the yard we use for storage. I know that spur. Everyone on our desk knows that spur. It's been on our decommissioned overlay since before I started. The rails were pulled up. I've driven past the cut myself, on the way to my sister's place in Rogers Park. There's a chain link fence and a gravel lot. A boarded up shed. That's it. No rail, no connection to the live network. And this train had come out of it, on an active line, signaling normally. I said, "Charlie." He didn't look up. Come here for a second." Something in my voice made him roll his chair over. He looked at the screen, then back at me. "Refresh it," he said. I refreshed it. The train was still there, still moving, now at 24. He traced the line back with his finger. When he hit the spur, he made a small sound in his throat. "That's Kelso spur," he said. "Yeah, that's not a line." "I know." He straightened up, picked up the phone on my desk, put it back down, picked it up again. Renee had noticed us by then and pulled out one earbud. "What?" "We've got a ghost tag," Charlie said, which was the wrong word, and I think he knew it, but nobody had a right word. I opened the tag details. The transponder ID was real. It matched a locomotive in our registered fleet, a switcher out of a subsidiary that mostly runs short freight between the intermodal yards and a couple of the last industrial spurs on the north side. Crew log was populated. 2 names. Departure time stamped at 3:22. Load. Empty passenger equipment being ferried east. Everything you'd want to see on a real run. Just again, coming from a place where a train physically could not be. I called the switcher's home yard. The desk guy sounded half asleep. He read me back the manifest. That switcher was logged for a run out of the storage yard, not Kelso. About 4 miles apart. I said, "Well, my board is showing him coming out of Kelso." He was quiet for a second. "Kelso's dead. I'm aware." "That's not, like, on the map." "I'm aware." I could hear him breathing. Then he said, "You want me to try to raise the crew? Please." While he did that, I pulled up the camera feed. We have a cluster around the north junction, where the live line passes closest to the old spur. I scrubbed back to 320 and let it play. At 3:24, a train came into frame from the west at normal switching speed, 2 units, and behind them a short string of passenger cars unlit. The lead unit had our company markings, 2 silhouettes in the cab. Everything about it looked like a train that had every right to be there. Behind it, the track it had come off of was the Kelso spur, which does not exist. I froze the frame and stared at it. Charlie was standing behind me with his hand on the back of my chair. He said very quietly, "That's the fence line right there." He was right. In the corner of the frame you could see the fence and the boarded shed behind it, right behind the train. I zoomed in as far as the feed would let me. The rails under the wheels were shiny, used. The ballast looked recent, like the spur had never been decommissioned, like someone had been quietly running trains over it while the rest of us treated it as a scar on the map for 15 years. The phone rang. The yard guy had raised the crew. They were confused about why he was calling. They said they were on schedule, coming out of the depot like they'd been told. He asked which depot. They said Kelso. He put the crew on hold and got back on with me. He said, "They think they came out of Kelso." They did come out of Kelso. That's not possible. Tell them to hold at the next signal. They didn't hold at the next signal. The train arrived at its terminating station about 11 minutes later, right on time for a normal transfer. It came in clean. The equipment checked out. Passengers walked off the cars, tired and cold. Nobody hurt. Nobody complained. None of that made the news. What made it into our incident file was the crew statement, and then, later, the security review. The crew said they'd shown up for their shift and found the gate at Kelso open, lights on, orders taped to the console with their run number. They assumed the depot had been reopened and nobody had told them. Happens more than you'd think in this industry. They didn't call it in. Everything looked normal. They ran the run. The gate had been opened by a man on camera at 2:51 that morning using a key. He walked in, turned on the lights, taped the slip to the console, and walked back out. He'd worked security at Kelso back when it was still running and stayed on for a couple of years after it closed. He'd left the company 12 years ago. When they found him at his house in Bridgeport, he handed over the ring of keys without any fuss. He'd kept them in a drawer in the kitchen since his last day. They asked why he'd done it. He thought about it for a while, and then he said, "I just wanted to see." Nobody asked him what he meant. Nobody has asked him since, as far as I know. He's not being charged with anything. He's an old man, and he didn't hurt anyone. I finished my shift that morning. I made a fresh pot of coffee for the day crew and signed out at 7:02 and drove home along the lake with the heat on high. The Kelso Spur is still on our decommissioned overlay. I check it sometimes, not every night, just sometimes. The first time I noticed slot B7 was the 3rd week of March, and only because I was bored enough to actually look at the shelves during my walk. Amazon doesn't pay a solo overnight guard to inspect inventory. They pay him to sit in a plastic chair and watch 6 monitors until the sun comes up. The warehouse sat off Route 60 outside Ashland, Kentucky, in a stretch of nothing but truck stops and gas stations, cold building, concrete floor that pulled the heat out of your boots. In March, the wind came in under the loading doors and made the plastic sheeting on the racks whisper for hours. My shift ran 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Walk the floor every 90 minutes, check the doors, log it on the tablet. B7 was in the returns section. Damaged goods, wrong addresses, stuff that would get resold in bulk. The slot on the second to bottom row was open, not knocked out, not broken, just pulled forward about 4 inches, like someone had reached in and left it that way. I pushed it back, marked the tablet, resecured, kept walking. Next night, same slot, pulled out the same 4 inches. I checked the access log. Nobody had scanned anywhere near B7 since the last day shift picker clocked out at 7:14 p.m. System showed the aisle untouched. I told myself the shelf was warped. Old plastic, cold air, whatever. I pushed it back in and went to make coffee. The 3rd night, I brought a Sharpie and drew a line across the top of the slot and the shelf frame, so I'd see if it moved. Came back at the end of my walk. The line was split. The slot was open. My mark on the frame sat about half an inch to the right of my mark on the slot. I stood there a full minute with the flashlight on it. The building had that particular kind of quiet a big warehouse gets at night, where the ventilation cycles on and off and you can hear the compressor click from 200 feet away. I started keeping a notebook. Not because I thought anything was wrong exactly, more because I wanted proof for the day shift that they had a maintenance issue. I wrote down the time I found the slot open each night. 3:14 a.m. Monday, 3:14 a.m. Tuesday, 3:14 Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Not a range, not around 3. 14 minutes past 3 every night without fail. I pulled the camera feed for aisle B on Wednesday and watched it back at my desk. Aisle empty, slot closed, then a jump. Not a hard cut, more like the timestamp skipped from 3:13:52 to 3:14:38. 46 seconds gone. When it came back, the slot was pulled out. I checked the other cameras. Every one of them had a skip in the same window. Loading dock, break room, front lot. Half a minute each, all in that narrow slice of the night. I didn't call anybody. What was I going to say? Hey, our system has a bug, and also a shelf keeps moving. I wrote it down and kept walking my rounds. The next thing I noticed was food. There's a bin near returns for products that get damaged in transit. Snacks, mostly, that split open in the truck. Granola bars, jerky, protein cookies. It gets emptied once a week, and is usually about half full by Friday. Mine was empty on a Tuesday. Empty again on Wednesday. I asked the day guy, a heavy-set guy everyone called Bear, if maintenance was pulling from it. Nobody pulls from that bin, man. That bin's a graveyard. I started photographing the bin before I left each morning. By 6 a.m., it was always exactly how I left it. By the time I clocked back in at 10, it was lighter, sometimes by 4 or 5 items. Somewhere in the day, but not on any camera anyone would ever review, somebody was eating. That's when I started thinking about the guy who got fired. I hadn't overlapped with him. He was gone before I started. But the break room story went like this. He'd been running a side hustle for months, moving electronics out through the trash compactor. Second shift supervisor caught him on video in December. HR walked him out in cuffs. His name was on a printed sheet by the time clock under a red header. Do not admit to premises. Just Cole. I asked Bear about him one morning. He kinda laughed, uncomfortable. Cole knew this building better than the guys who built it. Had a bunk in every corner, could disappear for a whole shift and clock a full 10 hours. A bunk. Figure of speech, man. I went home, slept badly. Came back that night with a real plan. I was going to sit in the dark in the mezzanine above returns from midnight to 4 and watch. Radio off, boots off so the floor wouldn't hear me. Folded jacket to sit on. The building did its usual thing. Compressor, vent. That thin whistle from the loading doors. Around 1:30 something metal shifted in the north wall, once. I wrote it down. At 3:11 I heard footsteps, not loud, slow, the kind of steps somebody takes when they've measured the distance 100 times and know exactly where the sensor cones are. They came from behind the walk-in refrigeration units at the back of the warehouse, moved up aisle A, cut across to B, and stopped at B7. I couldn't see him from where I was. The angle was wrong. I heard the slot slide open. I heard him breathe once, through his nose, then a rustle, like plastic. Then footsteps again, unhurried, back the way he came. I stayed on that mezzanine until my legs went numb. When I finally moved, it was almost 5. I did not want to walk past B7. I did anyway. The slot was pulled out 4 inches. Inside, sitting on returned kitchenware, was a granola bar wrapper folded in half. Chocolate chip, still warm from a pocket. I should have called somebody right then. I know that. Part of my brain kept insisting on a normal explanation. A homeless guy who'd found a warm spot. Somebody's cousin. A prank. I walked to the back of the warehouse, behind the walk-in coolers, where nobody goes because the compressors are loud and the floor is wet. There's a maintenance channel back there, maybe 3 feet wide, running the length of the wall. He'd made a room out of it. A blue camping sleeping bag rolled against the wall. A milk crate turned upside down for a table. 6 or 7 cans stacked in a small pyramid. Peaches, chili, Vienna sausages, a battery lantern, and on top of the crate, a printed piece of paper. My shift schedule for the month. Someone had gone through it with a ballpoint pen and marked each of my walks. 10:12, 11:44, 1:30, 3:30. On the margin, 1 line. New guy is slow, doesn't check mez. Under that, check Thursday for cash drop. I don't remember walking back to the desk. I remember sitting in the chair looking at the 6 monitors and seeing my own reflection in one of them, mostly because the aisle behind me was dark. I finished the shift, signed out at 6:04, drove home on 60 in the gray March light. I meant to call the branch manager when I woke up. I meant to call the police. I didn't go in that night. I didn't answer when the shift lead called at 10:22 or 10:47 or 11:15. I sat on my couch with the door chained and the TV off and watched the front window until it got light again. The HR woman left me a voicemail 3 days later. Flat, professional. She said they'd reviewed my tablet notes. Maintenance had walked the back of house and found signs of unauthorized entry. The area was secured. Matter closed, no further action required. She did not use his name. She did not ask why I hadn't come back. I never picked up my last check. They mailed it. The envelope sat on my counter almost a week before I opened it. When I did, there was a post-it stuck to the check. Yellow, company issue. In pen, in handwriting I didn't recognize. 3 words. Thanks for Thursday. August of 2020, I was working commercial dive for a contractor out of Baltimore. Small outfit, 4 full-timers, and a rotating pool of guys we'd call when the schedule got tight. Our bread and butter was hull cleaning, prop inspection, the boring stuff. But that summer, we picked up a bottom sweep on a berth over on the south side of the harbor, near where the container terminal meets the older piers. The city wanted it cleared before they leased the slip out again. If you've never done a bottom sweep in a working port, don't picture some clean archaeological grid. You picture fog. In Baltimore in August, the water down there is the color of black tea with milk in it. Visibility about 18 inches on a good day. Less if the current has been moving silt around. You don't see with your eyes, you see with your hands. We were running 2 divers with a topside crew of 3. Me and a guy we called Reese, who'd been doing this 11 years longer than me and still complained about the pay. Topside was our supervisor Danny, a tender named Mo, and a comms guy on the radio. Standard rig, umbilical, hard hat, hot water suit, because even in August, that harbor floor sits at 50-something. I went down first. Depth was maybe 22 feet at slack. Bottom is soft mud, with a crust of oyster shell and about 100 years of trash on top of it. First 40 minutes I pulled up the usual. A bike frame, 3 tires, what felt like an outboard motor cover, a shopping cart wedged deep enough I had to leave it and mark it. Danny was on comms, bored, telling me about his kid's baseball tryout. Then my glove hit something that wasn't right. You get to know what things feel like through neoprene and heavy rubber. Metal has a ring you feel in your bones. Wood is dead weight. This felt like when you press on the top of a leg through jeans. There was give, and then there was resistance under the give. I pulled my hand back, told Danny hang on a second, turned the light down close. which is a joke at that visibility, but I did it anyway. I saw a stripe of gray-blue. Then I saw the edge of what my brain finally translated as a shirt collar. I ran the light along and found the face at about 10 inches from my mask. Male, maybe 30. His eyes were open. He wasn't old down there. A day, 2 at most. The current had him tucked in against a bit of concrete rubble like somebody had set him down carefully. I've been doing this 8 years. I've pulled 2 bodies before, both of them people who went off the pier and didn't come back up. That's a thing that happens. It's not a good thing, but it's a thing you file into a shape and move on. This wasn't that. This was placed. I called it up to Danny. My voice was steadier than I expected. That's the training. You just say what you see. He asked me twice if I was sure, which he had to do, and then he told me to come up and mark the spot with a buoy line before I did. Top of the water is a different world. Sun, diesel smell off the tug that had been idling 2 slips down. Danny was already on the phone with the harbor police before my helmet came off. Reese looked at me and said, "You okay, man?" And I said, "Yeah," and we didn't talk about it. Harbor police were there in about 20 minutes. Then Baltimore PD, then 2 more unmarked cars. They set up on the pier and asked us to hold position. Standard procedure, they said. They needed a diver to go back down with one of their guys and help with the recovery. Reese volunteered, but they wanted whoever found him, which was me, so I went back down. The idea was simple. I'd guide the police diver to the body, we'd get a basket under it, topside would bring it up nice and slow. I dropped down the buoy line and started the sweep across, expecting to find him exactly where I'd left him, and I did. But when the police diver came down and I was waiting for him at the buoy, I moved maybe 3 feet to give him room, and my knee bumped something. It was the same feeling, give, then resistance. I froze, ran my hand along it, another shirt, another arm, different guy, similar build, similar age range as far as I could tell by the shape of him under the water. I told the police diver on our line. He came over, we felt around together, and that's when both of us at the same time hit the third one. They were laid out in a rough line, not tangled, not thrown, spaced, like somebody had done it in daylight, on a boat, and known exactly where the current would set them. I heard the police diver breathing over the line and I heard him say, "Quiet, oh, come on." That was it, just that. We came up. He talked to his people on the pier for a long time. Danny had gone white, which I'd never seen on him. Reese was smoking, which he wasn't supposed to do on the boat, and nobody was telling him to stop. They shut the site down for the rest of that day and the day after. Feds came in on the second day, FBI, and a couple of guys who didn't say which agency and didn't have to. They didn't wear anything with letters on it. They came off a black SUV and started asking questions like they'd asked them before. They ran the recovery themselves with their own divers, and they kept us on retainer because we knew the bottom and they didn't. I went back down twice more that week, guiding, not touching. They pulled 5 in total. All men, all somewhere between 25 and 40 as best as anyone could tell. Similar height range, similar build. None of them had wallets, none of them had phones, none of them had anything in their pockets that meant anything. Their clothes were normal. Jeans, work shirts, sneakers, the kind of clothes you'd see on a guy at a bus station. I heard later, through Danny, who heard it from somebody at the medical examiner's office, that the cause of death was the same on all 5. He didn't tell me what it was. I didn't ask. I decided at some point in that first week that I didn't want to know, because knowing wouldn't help me get back in the water. They identified 3 of the 5. The other 2, nothing. No missing persons match, no prints in any system, no dental. The case moved off the local desks by the end of that month. The feds ran with it. I gave a full statement, signed it, and got a phone call 2 weeks later asking if there was anything I wanted to add. There wasn't. I took 3 weeks off. Not because anybody made me, because after the 5th day of that job, I sat on my couch and realized I'd been holding my breath while watching TV. Then I went back to work. Same company, same rotation. And here's the part I don't really know how to say clean. The first job back was hull inspection on a barge. Different slip, different water, and I did it fine. The one after that was a bottom sweep on the other side of the harbor. I did that fine too. Water was the same tea and milk color, same 50-something degrees, same hand-first way of seeing. What I noticed was this: every time my glove hit something soft down there, a bag, a piece of foam packaging, a rag caught on rebar. There is a second, maybe a full second, where my whole body stops before my brain catches up and tells me what it is. It's always trash. It has been trash every single time for 2 years now, but that second happens anyway, and I don't think it's going to stop happening. I still work the harbor. I don't think about it topside. I think about it on the way down, in the last few feet before the bottom, when the light starts to give up, and the water goes from green to nothing, and then I get to work, because that's the job, and the job doesn't care. The place I worked was off Elm Hill Pike, tucked behind a monument yard on the east side of Nashville. From the road, you'd never know it was there. Just a low brick building with a loading bay and a sign that said "Receiving" in white vinyl letters that had started peeling at the corners. I ran the night shift alone. That was normal. The retort takes 6 to 8 hours per case depending on body weight, and someone has to be there to monitor temperature and airflow. It's boring work. Mostly you sit in a small office with a space heater and a portable TV and wait for the burn to finish, then break down the remains in the cremulator and label the container. March 2020, second week of the month, right before everything shut down. People were talking about the virus on the news, but the world hadn't tipped over yet. My shifts still ran on the same schedule. That Tuesday, I clocked in at 7. The dispatch board had 2 cases lined up for the night. First one was routine, a woman in her 80s out of a hospice in Antioch. I processed her, ran the retort, and around 1 in the morning, I was cleaning down when the intake buzzer went off. I checked the security camera. A white transport van, no logo. 2 men in the front, 1 already stepping out. Not the regular service. We had contracts with 3 funeral homes and a hospital transport company, and I knew all the drivers by face. I buzzed them in through the bay. The one who did the paperwork was maybe 50, gray at the temples, wore a dark windbreaker with no patch on it. The other one stayed with the gurney. They had the body in a standard vinyl pouch on a fold-out cot, and everything about how they moved said they'd done this 1,000 times. The paperwork checked out. Cremation authorization signed by next of kin. Death certificate filled out and signed. Cause of death listed as cardiac arrest. Time of death, 8:32 p.m. Physician's signature and license number. Everything in the right boxes. I signed for receipt. The 2 men left without much conversation. The older one said, "Appreciate it," on the way out, and that was it. I logged the case and rolled the cot into the prep room. Now here's where it started. I'd been doing this for 4 years. You learn what a body looks like a few hours after death, even a fresh one. The color changes in the fingertips and the lips. The tissue starts to settle. You get some rigidity in the jaw and the smaller muscles first. There's a smell, not always strong, but present. This body had none of that. I unzipped the pouch to do the standard visual check we're required to do before loading. Male, mid-30s, dark hair, no visible trauma. Skin still had the color of a living person. Not pale, not blue at the extremities. I pressed my fingers to the side of the neck out of habit, just to move his head for the ID band, and the flesh gave way like anyone else's. Warm, not room temperature, warm. I stopped. I stood there for, I don't know how long, maybe a minute. I put the back of my hand against his cheek. Same thing. There was no rigidity in the jaw. I lifted his wrist, and the arm moved without resistance, then settled back down naturally, the way a sleeping person's would. His fingernails were pink. I checked the paperwork again. 5 hours and change since the listed time of death. I want to be clear, I wasn't panicking. I've seen a lot of things in that room. Bodies that looked younger than their age, bodies that came in embalmed and stayed pink because of the chemistry. Sometimes the paperwork gets the time wrong by an hour or 2, but the combination of all of it, the warmth, the tone, the color, the absence of any single marker, that was not something I could file under normal variation. I did what the manual says. I called the physician on the certificate. It rang 4 times and a man picked up. Voice was clear, not sleepy. I gave him the case number and told him I was calling from the crematory and I needed him to come in and verify the decedent before I proceeded. I kept it neutral. I didn't say why on the phone. He said, "I'll be there in an hour." He didn't ask a single question. I sat in the office with the door open and the prep room lights on. I didn't touch the body again. I made a coffee I didn't drink. On the little TV, someone was talking about testing kits and travel restrictions. I kept looking at the clock on the wall. He came in through the front around 2:30. Older than I'd expected. Thin, wearing a fleece over a button-down. He had a physician's ID clipped to his belt, but I didn't get a good look at it. He nodded at me and went straight to the prep room like he already knew the layout. I followed him in. He stood at the cot for a long time. He didn't take out a stethoscope. He didn't put on gloves. He looked at the man's face, then at his hands, then at the paperwork on the counter, then back at the face. His mouth moved once, like he was going to say something, and changed his mind. Then he said, without turning around, "Proceed with the procedure." I said, "Sir, this body doesn't present as deceased." He said it again, same tone, "Proceed with the procedure." I told him no. I told him I wasn't going to load a body that hadn't been properly verified, and I was going to note the anomalies in the log, and if he wanted to escalate that with my supervisor in the morning, he could. I kept my voice even. My hands were not. He looked at me for what felt like a while. He didn't argue. He picked up the paperwork off the counter, folded it once, put it in his inside pocket, and walked back out through the front. I stood in the prep room with the body and the empty counter where the paperwork used to be. I wrote everything I could remember in the log. Every observation, every timestamp, the physician's name as I remembered it from the certificate. I wrote until my hand cramped. Around 4 in the morning, a different transport van pulled up. 2 people I hadn't seen before. Different vehicle, different paperwork. They had a release order signed by someone at a name I didn't recognize. On letterhead I'd never seen. They loaded the cot and left. I signed nothing. They didn't ask me to. I finished my shift, went home, slept badly. I turned in my 2 weeks that Thursday. I told my supervisor it was because of the virus, which wasn't a lie exactly. Everyone was making decisions like that. He didn't push. My last day was the 27th. I never got a call about the case. Nobody from the office asked me about the log entry. When I stopped by 6 weeks later to pick up my final check, the page for that night in the intake binder was still there, but the entry had been amended, and it wasn't in my handwriting. A few months after that, a reporter for one of the local papers ran a piece about a physician in Davidson County whose license was under review. Different context, unrelated case, some issue with prescriptions, but the name was the same as the one on my certificate that night. I read the article twice and closed the tab. I haven't looked into it further. I don't want to know what he was signing off on, or who the man on my cot was, or where either of them went after they left my building. I moved out of Tennessee that summer. And with that, we fade back toward the light. But not all the way. I appreciate you being here until the absolute end. What story is going to follow you around? Tell the comments. The vault's endless, each entry more twisted. Stay aware. Next time waits for no one.